We're thrilled to have Alex Strachan and Colleen Tate from MNP with us today. So Alex is a senior farm management consultant with MNP's Prairie Consulting team out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Working one-on-one with farmers and agribusinesses, Alex's strong problem-solving skills allow him to find innovative solutions for his clients. His services include strategic and financial planning, benchmarking, feasibility analysis, and cost of production analysis. Colleen Tate is a business advisor with MNP's assurance and accounting team in Edmonton and leads the firm's national poultry and Alberta's food and beverage processing teams. So welcome, Alex and Colleen. I'm looking forward to the next 60 minutes. Let's jump right into it. Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Lane, and thank you to everyone for having us on today. So, as Lane said here, we're going to jump right into it. So today we're going to be talking about SWOT analysis. So let's kick it right off right away. Who here, by answering a quick poll, if you can react and do a thumbs up if you've heard of SWOT before, or if you haven't, put a smiley face if you've done one yourself. And I believe the other option we had was to put a smiley face if you've never done one before. So go ahead and start putting your reactions where we can, and we'll get started. All right, keep those reactions coming through, and we can take a look at where everyone is at in terms of our webinar here today. So it looks like we're having a good variation of all our answers here, a good mix of some who maybe this is their first time really diving into a SWOT analysis, others who maybe have done one of their own. I know we had an activity booklet here beforehand to see if we could get one filled out. And then we have some who are looking for trying to see what we can learn about a SWOT. So let's get underway. So first and foremost, for you who haven't heard of a SWOT analysis before, let's just get right into what this exercise really is about and how to conduct one. So if you've already heard about a SWOT analysis, bear with us. This will be a helpful, short, quick review here on what we're going to be talking about today. So the SWOT analysis really pushes us to reflect on the internal and external factors that might affect our operation. And really it's foundational to strategic thinking and business planning as a whole. So for some it's well known, for others it's not, but regardless of the industry that you might be in, it gives us the ability to recognize details that affect our operation. So based on what we see on the slide here, we've got, it helps us find opportunities for growth and improvement, and it allows us to really see a whole big view of and understand our operation, the environment we operate in. So it's really, really important to approach a SWOT analysis from a couple different lenses. So whether it be from a personal scale, so we're looking inwards on yourself as a farm operator, perhaps your stakeholders, family members, business partners, you name it. But it's also important to look at it on a macro scale. So it's good for us to understand what's going on, what landscape that we're in with our operation. So we cover a bit of an industry analysis portion in our full day workshop that we also are offering with FCC. So I'll give a little preview to that quickly, but if you're more interested in this part, do sign up for those. That's when it comes by your area. So really, it's important to understand what's going on locally, provincially, whether it be nationally, globally, and how might this affect my operation. So really have that in mind when we go through this exercise today and all the bits and pieces of it, that we always have to be an understanding of where we stand and the changing landscape around us. So again, to conduct a SWOT analysis, what are these components? So as Lane alluded to, we have our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. So to really begin our SWOT analysis, you have to be able to create a table or a list or sit around a room, put a piece of paper in front of you, and really give each section a heading of the ones you see on the screen. And if you've never connected a SWOT analysis before, we've provided a worksheet in the resources section of the webinar here. So it's our job to now reflect and identify our strengths, weaknesses, as well as the opportunities ahead of us and the threats that our operation faces. So we need to separate our internal factors, which would be our strengths and our weaknesses, from our external factors, which is our opportunities and our threats. So we'll work out the differences together and provide some suggestions on how we can get started. First and foremost, our strengths. This one typically is the easy one for producers to come up with. So really it's, what are you good at? What do you do well? What do you do that's better, or what do you do that's different from others? Like that can be neighbors, peers, friends on other parts of the country, whatever it might be. What do you see, or what do your peers see as your strongest points as a manager, or as an operator, or just as a person? So when we're talking strengths, we're talking about looking internally. So personally, what am I good at? What is my team at? What is the family good at? This can be something as simple as bookkeeping, something as simple as relationship building. It can be a bit more abstract, leadership. Maybe you're really good at envisioning, making plans. Perhaps you're very good at people management. So these are different ways of looking at our strengths, and this is kind of where you get to brag about yourself. So understanding what you're good at is very important, but it's also important to look at it from a lens of what external parties might think about you as well, or what they can expect from you. So I like to always look at it in that sense. Now, if we move on to what are our weaknesses? Weaknesses, very similarly to our strengths, this is an internal factor to our SWOT analysis. So we look inwards and say, what can I improve on? What is something that I am less proficient at? Being able to identify what you're less good at is equally as valuable as understanding what your strengths are, because this allows you to put down on paper what perhaps you could use help on, what you need focusing on or improving on, and where you can actually focus on learning, developing, or maybe the result is that you hire it out if it's not something that you're willing to put time or effort in. So really, this can be, again, something about yourself personally as an operator, something that your team maybe struggles with. Where do you have fewer resources on your team or in your farm operation that maybe is different than your neighbor or a peer? And what do others think your weaknesses are? So at the risk of sounding extremely cliche here, weaknesses really can be turned into opportunities if they're addressed properly and proactively. And that takes us on to our opportunities. So now we're changing our lens when we're at this point in the analysis, and we're trying to figure out what external factors we need to identify and that we can possibly take advantage of going forward in the future. So these can vary from what's out there for you, what trends are there in the market or in the industry that you're in that you could possibly take advantage of, and then how can we turn some of our strengths into opportunities. So a couple examples could be, perhaps the market that we're in is in a short supply of the commodity that we produce. So the trend is indicating maybe that prices could be on the rise. Perhaps there is a shortage just in our area, so maybe the local buyers are willing to pay up for the product that we have and others might not. Perhaps a neighbor is looking to retire in the near future, and that's on our radar to perhaps grow our opportunity as an operation, grow some acres, maybe grab some quota from the neighbor, what have you, to be able to pass on to the next generation. So expansion perhaps is a great opportunity for us as a farm. And you know what? Maybe it's something as simple as the board is looking to allocate more quota. I know each year they take a look at it and sometimes they allocate more quota out. So that's also an opportunity that we can identify early on here in our analysis. So once again, We are looking at external factors here that can directly affect our operation and that can provide us with a successful outlook. Which then takes us to our next corner of our SWOT analysis. So that's our threats. So what threats could harm you? What is your competition doing? What threats do your weaknesses expose you to? So threats, again, are external factors that can lead our operation to financial or operational struggle. What are the hurdles that are ahead of us? So this really brings us back to our industry analysis that I mentioned earlier. And what are some of the threats that perhaps are in our industry locally, nationally, or globally? These are very important things to reflect on and really identify as we go through this exercise, because you as operators have to be proactive if these threats become real. I like to say, planning for the worst, but hoping for the best is typically good practice. So many threats are really out of our control. So that's why we have to be prepared and have action plans to cope with them if they end up coming to fruition. So a couple simple examples of some threats would be, locally, there's a shortage of some labor. Perhaps nationally, we're in an industry now where our interest rates are higher than we're typically accustomed to. Or perhaps, we can look at disease. If you look at avian influenza over the last year or so, and some are still battling through some of those issues. Those are things that are out of our control. Although if we have a proactive plan, we can understand how we need to pivot as an operation if anything actually comes to fruition. So that takes us to an activity where we'd like to see a poll here of which part of the SWOT analysis is the most difficult for you, and then maybe I can chat about that for a moment. So please post your polls and we can see where we're at. So maybe I'll leave a minute here for everyone to get their votes in on the poll. But really what we're asking of you here is to really think about, if you were to have this exercise in front of you, which maybe some of you do right now, where are the areas that you had trouble identifying some things, whether it be about yourselves, for your strengths or weaknesses, or perhaps it's hard for you to think about the market outside of your four walls, or maybe you don't keep up on global events that might be occurring. So it looks like opportunity seems to be kind of the front runner here. So I'd be very interested to actually see or chat with some of you about what those opportunities, why is it so hard for us to identify opportunities, and what does that mean? So we can close up the poll now. So thank you for all of those who polled. That's very helpful to us. So again, this is a very good exercise to look at ourselves and say, what do I maybe need a bit of help with or spend some more time on? So for about half of you, it seemed that, again, the opportunities was somewhere you wanted to get some focus on. So I'm hoping here to go through some examples for you that I've come up with just, for the sake of this webinar, and maybe dive a little bit deeper into it with you here. So, right, so sorry about that. So once we get into it a bit here, I want to go some typical examples of some SWOT analysis that I've seen that we've done with some of our clients, and provide some commentary surrounding those. So what I do here with MNP, I know Lane alluded to it and kind of gave me that introduction. So we work with many farmers, whether it be across all industries, some agribusiness players as well, and we help them really focus in on their strategy, their game plan, and we use these types of analysis to help identify some pressure points and some places they can kind of focus their attention to in the short and long term. So when we're talking SWOT analysis, this is really kind of our bread and butter here when we undergo our first chats with some clients that we have. So if you would like some further examples beyond what I go with it within the presentation here today, you can download a copy of FCC's sample business plan, and it's in the resources section of the webinar platform. So take a look in there. There's a really good couple examples in there for each of them. So my examples aren't the only ones available to you if you're looking for a little bit more. So let's get right into it. So for our analysis here, I hear this one a lot, and this might be a little bit more towards a grain farmer, but many of you who have some livestock on the farm, maybe this is a good strength of yours as well. But we hear all the time, oh, I'm a great farmer. I can grow a big crop, or I really like to nerd out on the agronomics. I have that in my front pocket. That is my number one strength. And so I hear this one all the time. And that's a good thing. That's something that, again, this is the section where you get to brag about yourself. So something as simple as agronomic knowledge or growing a big crop, if that's your strength, identify it and don't quit on it. That is a great strength that we see. So having this as a strength opens up a lot of opportunity for those who might have this example, right? If you grow a big crop, whether it be as a livestock operation or as a grain operation, it gives you the choice to make decisions based on when you need to do them. So if I grow a big crop and I have to feed a whole bunch of dairy cows, at least I know kind of what my stockpile is. I don't have to go and outsource grain maybe when the market's a little bit volatile. So the ball is really in my court. So in this example, I've decided to go with strengths as my number one kind of most common one that I see. When I come over to weaknesses, these ones get a little bit more vast and they vary a little bit more based on the type of operation, where they're at in their business cycle, whether they're in growth mode, maybe they've run into a bit of financial trouble, maybe they're doing extremely well and don't know what to do next. But I would say the first one that I see quite a bit is overcapitalization. So what do I mean by that? Often, and especially in the last couple of years, where we've seen in ag quite strong years in terms of prices. We've seen some high input costs for sure, but overall very, very successful years. So we've seen guys and girls really tend to overcapitalize. So they might have a bit more equipment or a lot more equipment than they might need, whether that be on a per acre basis or just in general. So the big issue is what we see with folks is they have a lot of cash in the checking account and they decide it's time to buy that new X9, right? I mean, if the farm needs it, great, but it's often worth a good look and a good strong look with your banker as well to see, well, should I be purchasing this out of cash? Should I be terming this out? Or kind of somewhere in between. So overcapitalization, many identify that, hey, I've got too much equipment on the farm, but that's just the way where we're at right now. Time management. This one actually is an interesting one that many have a hard time identifying or have a hard time admitting to. So when I talk about time management and delegation, that's really it's easier if I do it myself. And I don't think this weakness is necessarily unique to agriculture. I know in our line of work and Colleen's line of work, we often, once we get really stressed and maybe have a lot on our plate, we stick to what we know and we don't share the work when we might need a bit of help. So we might work ourselves a little too much when really we could have handed off a task or two to someone else while I could focus on something that maybe was more, to my level of expertise. And we see this all the time. We see this all the time with producers like yourselves who, you've grown up on farming, right? This is what you know. This is your bread and butter, and it's hard to give up time where that you've been raised on maybe, putting in the crop, or you've been raised in checking the robots, and that's your bread and butter, and you want to make sure that you're hands-on. So definitely a very, very normal thing to go through. And then we go into marketing. So this one can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. So when we're talking a weakness in marketing, that might just be not having a plan at all. Maybe we're only selling, our commodity when we need the cash versus maybe capitalizing on beneficial times in the market. Maybe we're missing out on opportunities. Maybe we're just kind of going by gut feeling. And that doesn't necessarily make it a weakness. It's just not having a plan can sometimes backfire when things get tough. So that takes us now to our opportunities. So when we talk opportunities, my first one here, which kind of goes hand in hand with our capitalization, overcapitalization, I should say, because room for growth, maybe you have too much machinery. So maybe you're prepped for a larger acre base. Maybe you have a couple of kids on the farm who are looking to farm as well. So maybe adding those additional acres is a good thing, or that you're prepared for it. So room for growth is always a huge opportunity. So when we're talking about these type of opportunities, and that would be more of a local opportunity. So if we see neighbors up for sale, or we see perhaps rented acres that are becoming available when they first weren't, these are good things for our operation. And what we see a lot in our world day to day is two things. We see guys or operations who see a neighbor's up for sale and say, you know what, I can't afford that. It's not in the books. I don't think we got it. And that's okay. Then we see some who say, nope, we're going to do it and we'll figure it out after. There's a bit of a medium ground you need to find, and understanding your operation and what you can handle in terms of, say more debt, more time, more equipment, maybe you need more bodies. All of these things play into what we need to kind of focus our attention on. But as a high level opportunity, room for growth definitely is a good one there. Industry opportunities. So I made this one very kind of high level just so I could go into a couple of examples. So if we're in the Canadian prairies, which some of you might be, we might say that there's a great opportunity in, let's say, biodiesel. We're seeing an uptick in what we're using our canola for and it going into the biodiesel industry. And for those of you in Alberta, Saskatchewan, we've seen a lot of crush capacity get announced on the canola side or even completed. So as an industry, if I'm sitting close to a new crush plant, I'm saying, hey, there's probably some opportunity here for me to grow that crop that they're going to be in demand for. And maybe that will change the outlook of how I plan my acres going forward. Doesn't mean I'm going to put all of my acres toward that crop in particular. That might have a kind of a medium to larger scale opportunity, but it definitely sets up if we put it in our plan to say, hey, we're seeing 30 to 50% increases in demand locally for a product. This is something we need to consider when we put our plan going forward. And then kids, I kind of mentioned it in our room for growth, but at the same time, I hear countless people say, man, I really wish my kids would want to take the farm from me. And on the other side of things, having very involved children on the farm does create an opportunity, because every farm operation is in a different life cycle, is what we like to call it. So if I'm a sole proprietor, I'm Alex the farmer, I've got Alex Farms going well for me, and I'm a 30-year-old man looking to continue farming for another 30 years. Great. So the way that works for me now in my headspace is that my decision kind of horizon is going to be for that 30 years. So not that can be an opportunity, but having kids who want to farm, say in 10 years from now, I'm 40, I've got maybe some 10, 15-year-olds running around, and they're saying, hey, I really want to be a part of this farm. Well, now my decision horizon is lengthened from my original timeline of, say, when I'm 60, so now I'm 20 years out, to now I'm thinking for the next generation. So if I was thinking a bit more short term for sole proprietorship, Alex Farms, maybe I don't go out and buy the neighbor's hog operation when they want to retire. Maybe I don't go out and buy more chicken quota or more acres, because you know what? I've got what I've got here, and that's good enough for my retirement. When I'm ready to go, I can wash my hands with it, exit the market, get my chunk of equity back, and move on. But when the kids want to farm, now my decision-making mindset is completely changed. And that's a huge opportunity for them, as well as for me, to shift that and saying, well, if I can keep gradually making decisions that are to the benefit of who's next and what's coming next, that really changes the scope of what you can accomplish as an operation. Not saying that those who want to, do their own retirement is not a good thing, but when we're talking growth, we're talking opportunity. This is definitely a very, very good example of that. So now we go into our threats. So when we talk about threats, these are things that I mentioned before. They can be out of our control. So these are things that we need to think about, whether it be locally, nationally. It kind of all goes back to that same theme of just understanding what environment we're in, how we fit in, pardon me, how we fit into that mix of competitors, players, suppliers, purchasers. All those things are kind of in cohesion with one another, but really we have to think about our operation and start to zoom out. So I started with the first one here of competition for land. I would be hard done by to not find someone who has faced competition for land in the last 5 years in their neighboring area. So that's a huge threat, because if one of my opportunities is that I have lots of room to growth, maybe I've invested heavily in infrastructure or machinery, people, what have you, this could be a huge threat for my operation if all of a sudden, I can't maybe afford to expand or to get a bigger land base. But just the fact that maybe I can't even get to it because there's so many other buyers in the market who are willing to pay just as much or more than I am. So we see this quite a bit, at least in Manitoba, where I'm from. We see a lot of neighboring operations start to move away from knocking on the neighbor's door and saying, hey, I'm thinking about getting out of the market or downsizing, getting rid of quarter section, and really they're starting to bring that to the market to see what they can get, because there's always been a lot of buyers out there. We've seen in the last number of years through even the FCC land value reports that, at least in Manitoba, I can't speak exactly to Sask and Alberta. I have it somewhere in my head of mine, but I know we've seen double-digit increases 2 or 3 years in a row. So it's becoming more and more difficult to expand our operations, or even make it very difficult for those starting from scratch to be financially feasible. So this is a huge threat to those whose game plan is to expand, because for those who have a perfect spot for the next plot of land, well, there's going to be eyes on it, there's going to be money flowing at it, and it's really up to the person who owns that piece of land or that farm to do what's best for them, and that might not always be in your best interest. So that takes me to, rented land could come up for sale. So we have seen this a couple of times where if you are, let's just say, a 6,000 acre grain farm and you rent half of your acres. So right now things are going well, you're paying off your debt, you've got some rent payments, that's all good. We're right sized for our operation in terms of machinery, but would you look at that? Neighbor is looking to sell, and perhaps we don't have right of first refusal on that land. So right now then we're at risk of losing half of our acres, really, that 3,000 rented of the 6,000 total. We're at risk of losing 3,000 or half of our productive assets that we don't own. But right now we're actually sized, and our fixed costs are based on our operation as a whole. So losing those acres, not a lot of our actual costs are changing, but are on the gross margin side. So what we're getting out of that land, whether it be our revenue minus our expenses, those are going to go away, but the rest of our operation remains very much the same. So that's a massive risk for those who are renting land right now, and it's a large portion of their total land base. So that's something that we've seen quite a bit, and that could cause some overpaying because you can't afford to lose the land. But it also makes it tricky at the same time. If you flip it around, if we were to outright purchase those acres that we were previously renting, now we have all this extra debt and literally zero change to our top line revenue or our gross margin, because we're always at 6,000 acres, but now all of a sudden we're repaying again for half of them, and it's a whole lot more than our rent payment, perhaps, with this interest rate environment. So you can see how that as a threat can be a little bit detrimental to maybe our plans going forward if we have to purchase land we feel we already have. And it can get tricky from the banking side as well to make that really work. So my last one here, and I want to go into this one a little bit more later, but lack of diversification. Not at your own fault, but realistically, farms are pretty much not that diversified. Unless you're a multi-livestock operation where you have maybe a little bit of everything, maybe more similar to a colony type setup. But there's going to be a lot of grain farmers. There's going to be a lot of egg farmers, a lot of chicken farmers, a lot of dairy farmers who really, for lack of better terms, might have all their eggs in one basket. And that's just the nature of, farming and the agricultural business as it is. But that's just it is definitely a threat where if you have all your eggs in one basket, you're really at the mercy of the industry and those ebbs and flows. I mean, if you're in a quota system, really your biggest threat is your livestock and your feed costs. But lack of diversification really can be the thorn in our side, but there's not a whole ton we can do about it at this point. So from there, I guess if I should ask Colleen and Lane, are there any questions or comments in the chat up until this point?
We do have some questions, but I think you're good to keep carrying along, and we'll save those till we get closer to the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lane. So this takes us into more of our discussion and Q&A, and we'll save maybe our discussion or the Q&A point for the end. But what I wanted to make sure we covered, we prepared a couple of frequently asked questions. So I'm sure some of them are probably in the chat, and I know we probably made sure that we save them for the end for that reason exactly. So the number one question that we'll get is, well, what do these results mean? What am I supposed to do with this information? And how do I put this into action for my own farm? There we go. How do I put this into action for my own farm? What do I do next? So what these results mean, and the number one thing that really should come from this is it's about setting your intention. So if you've taken the time to sit down and do this analysis and really reflect upon your operation, you as an operator, or to sit down with yourself, with your stakeholders, and identify what areas really need or deserve the most attention. And that doesn't necessarily mean today, but that can be what areas deserve the most attention today, or maybe over the next quarter. Maybe it's over the next year, maybe it's over the next 3 years. So not all action plans need to have an immediate impact or anything like that, but it just needs to be intentional. So the big goal here is to take our reflections and what we've identified about us as operators and our operations and set goals surrounding these thoughts. So for me, what I always find that people who conduct these analysis is it's about putting something into motion formally, whether that be on paper, as formal goals, and we can get into that. We have another webinar surrounding goals and mission statements and vision. These all intertwine. So if you decide you want to listen to all of these webinars and attend the in-person course, a lot of these themes really kind of intertwine with one another. So when it comes to the SWOT analysis, when I say put something in motion formally, is really making sure that we set goals and hold ourselves accountable. just saying, hey, you know what, I'm sure many of you, and I'm guilty of this too, I'm gonna go to the gym more in January than I have all year, because some divine intervention is going to say that I'm going to do better than I did in December. But just saying it is meaningless. Some people, they might join a run club, right? Just to hold themselves accountable. But when it comes to our operations, including our immediate, stakeholders, whether that be brothers, sisters, parents, whoever else is involved in this operation, to sit down and get aligned on what we need to do and how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. So this accountability. This creates accountability and structure, and really sets our expectations from one another and on ourselves. But something we need to ask ourselves is, do these actions, goals, these plans that we're making, these things we've identified, do they align with what we strive to do as a business? Are we still on our original path, or have we created a new one for ourselves? And this is really an important one. Once we get into our mission statement vision, we want to make sure that all the things that we strive to do still remain true to what we're trying to accomplish as an operation. And that can be different across the board. But really, we want to make sure that we're focusing on things that are important to us, and just saying, hey, maybe I'm not as good at leveraging off or handing off work. Well, is that something that we need to work on today, or that we hope to improve kind of gradually over time? So I think I'm going to focus on an area of focus here. So, what are we looking to do? Are we looking to improve on a weakness? Are we hoping to maybe lean a little bit harder into a strength of ours? Are we looking to, really, hey, there's an opportunity, it's time, let's get moving? All of these are the right answer. And it depends on where you're at and what you're hoping to accomplish in the near term and the long term. So an example here is, if you've identified that one of your weaknesses is perhaps not really understanding what's out there or how to use tools that help manage risk on the farm. So my background, I come from more of a grain background. I started with a grain company helping producers with the risk management, helping them plan out their sales and using all sorts of hedging mechanisms to add value and protect the value of their crops. So let's say that you've identified that a weakness of yours is really not understanding some of these tools that are available to you, or you've maybe had a bad experience and you feel like you've left some money on the table, or you made some uneducated emotional decisions, something along those terms. So you feel, hey, I wish I could get better at understanding these tools that are available to me. So that type of goal, that doesn't happen overnight. We can't just all of a sudden say, hey, I want to get better at using puts and calls, but man, I do wish I understood them better. And I want to hold myself accountable, not just to say, hey, I'm gonna call up my broker or call up a grain company and say, hey, let's put calls and puts on everything, right? And I don't know why you want to do that in the first place, puts and calls on everything. But let's just say we wanted to set a goal of, I want to attend 3 workshops a year over the next 2 years to better understand these things that are available to me. And maybe you build in the meeting with your broker every so often to say, hey, I'd like to try something I've just learned about. Can we do something with this? So these are something that, this is an example of something that it doesn't have to happen overnight, but if it's truly important to you and you see there's a big opportunity, that we need to make a conscious effort and hold ourselves accountable going forward.
Awesome. And I'm just going to remind everyone, if they can throw any questions they're seeing into the Q&A or into the chat. I'm seeing some come through there, and we're definitely adding them to the list. So appreciate that. Alex, what about creating opportunities out of your farm strengths? Can we maybe chat about some examples or opportunities of what we can see there?
Sure. So really on creating opportunities out of strengths, it sounds a little cliche, I think, but that's why I wanted to make sure that we covered it, because really having a strength is something, and in my example, it was something as simple as, I grow a great crop. Okay, so that this is something that we need to still make sure that we leverage, that we take advantage of. So if you can combine, if we use my example from before of maybe our industry is really thriving or has a good outlook for corn in my area, or corn across Canada in general, is if they're saying, or it's truly deemed to be a good opportunity. Well, then I better make sure that I really lean on my strength of agronomic knowledge and execution, that this is something that's still very important to my farm. And just saying I'm good at it and leaving it be, that isn't going to cut it. So when we identify an opportunity or create an opportunity out of your strengths, that could be something as well where maybe the opportunity doesn't have to present itself first. Excuse me. And so if we have a strength in people management on the farm or in vision, turning this into an opportunity, what does that look like? So if I'm a very strong leader and say I have 3 employees, a couple, siblings or family members who work on the farm, if I'm a very good leader, teacher, then maybe an opportunity for us is, if we're planning on expanding or if the kids want to farm, maybe I start leaning on others a bit to take a bit more of the workload, so I could take the time to pass on some knowledge and really kind of show people the ropes of, hey, this is how I've learned how to do things. Here's my knowledge. Here are my resources. And I see that as a huge opportunity. If your goal is to grow, then knowledge transfer is a massive piece of that. And if you can't grab your personal strengths and apply them to an opportunity, that's going to make it very hard for the continuity of the farm, especially if your goals are to grow. Maybe a family member wants to exit. So kind of bluntly to say, how do I create opportunities out of my farm strengths, is to really reflect on, well, what do I do well and what does that mean? So kind of contrary to weaknesses, if you're worried about some weaknesses, how do you fill those gaps? Well, basically on the strength side is saying, hey, if I can create an opportunity, what would that be because I'm good at growing a good corn crop? And there's a lot of different answers, whether it be maybe it gets to the point where you want to invest in a dryer because you're so confident in your ability to grow good grain, but you want to maybe do a bit of value add on the farm because of the high volume putting through. These are all little things that you can do, that you can think of to say, okay, well, I'm very good at what I do. What's next?
Awesome. And sometimes when we look at our own strengths, it's easy, especially in a SWOT analysis, to breeze over the things that we're really doing a good job of. And I know you mentioned that quite often we just find, the one, and then we move on to the weaknesses. When we are in that build and refocus mode, it's easy to focus on the negatives, and just making sure that we continue to drive forward with those strengths and remain strong where we are.
Absolutely. No, it's a great comment, Colleen. To make sure you don't sell yourself short, right? You want to make sure that you're not just identifying, hey, I'm a good guy, so people like to do business with me. Well, what else, right? Maybe I'm really good at managing expenses. Maybe I'm really good at inspiring others to do a good job. And those are all little things that build up to quite a big thing. So that's a great comment, Colleen.
Yeah. Another question here, and you've given some really great examples, but what other things would we talk about for threats? One common one that we often hear, especially in crop farming or anything, well, most of farming is weather related, but we often hear weather is the first one that's mentioned, but maybe a few other examples?
Sure thing. So, weather is the easiest one to go to because every farmer has experienced some sort of, oh, it's awfully dry this spring. Oh, it's too wet, it's too dry. It never seems to be just right. So other threats beside weather, there's so many things that you as farmers and operators and business owners have to worry about, and things that affect you. Think geopolitical tensions. That one probably has one of the bigger impacts outside of weather on your operations. I know when I first started, and it's still a relevant issue nowadays, is Canada's relationship with India. Right, for a while, there's huge import tariffs over a certain amount, that then they're not taking any of our lentils, our peas, you name it. So that alone, from one standpoint, really put a thorn in pulse growers' sides throughout the prairies, where there really wasn't anywhere to sell our beans. And so, I mean, it's one crop. What maybe in some regions that's not something you grow, so it didn't feel as impactful. But you look to the U.S. and our relationship with China over the last few years. China just absolutely stopped buying canola from Canada for quite a while, and that really put a lot of pressure on the canola market. And these are things that, whether you had amazing rain, perfect seed timing, put the right fertilizer down at the right time in the right place and the right method, these are things that are out of our control. But what can we do to be proactive? And this is the whole point of this exercise is, if we're thinking about geopolitical tensions in the world, whether it be war, I didn't even mention that. We've seen war over the last couple of years, where the availability of wheat to the world has been in question. And then the next day, there's way too much wheat because they've opened the corridor. Countries are able to ship through the Black Sea. Things can change on the drop of a dime, right? So understanding maybe diversifying our crop build, or maybe who we buy feed from, just to be able to kind of hedge our bets on what's going on. So one more thing I'll say, Colleen, is that I mentioned, diversification before. As farmers, you guys aren't diversified. Like I said, you are absolutely typically not diversified. So it's up to you to, if you have good years, to use that extra cash or equity and decide what to do with it. Maybe it's investing something off farm, or if you've had good years, maybe it's about reinvesting in the farm. And it likely still is all in that same basket, but just understanding that, hey, I've got all my eggs in one basket. I need to be aware of what other things I could be doing or need to be aware of. So there's a lot of things we need to think about when we think of threats. And I want to make sure that I reiterate thinking not just locally, because many are saying, oh, hey, it's really dry in my backyard, so wheat price has to be $15 a bushel because I'm having a tough time growing it. Well, often the world market doesn't care about Oak Bluff, Manitoba, and if they have a good crop or not, right? So we have to get past that narrow thinking and start thinking, okay, provincially, nationally, internationally, politically, there's all these different things that you as farmers have to have your finger on, which is extremely difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good point that so many things in SWOT analysis can change pretty quickly, especially in farming. So how often would you suggest we look at redoing a SWOT analysis or keeping it going? Is there any guidance maybe we can share on that?
I would say, I think it depends on what goals you're setting. I mean, I think yearly is probably good. Every 2 years is probably fine, but it depends if your trajectory changes all of a sudden. So if we have put out X amount of goals after our SWOT analysis here, and that puts us on a path, we have milestones we want to hit by certain times, and we'll cover that in our goal setting webinar about a bit more into those details. But if all of a sudden we pivot or we take a fork in the road that takes us down maybe a different path, it might be worth revisiting that immediately, or a couple quarters in, to say, okay, well, hey, we hit our deadline early, or we've completely changed plans. Maybe it's time we set new goals and identify new risks or opportunities based on whatever changed. So if back to my example of a threat of, hey, we just lost half our acres, or maybe that's a little dramatic, but we've lost some acres. Are things still the same? Do we need to start shifting our focus onto different things? So I think annually is probably the logical thing for me, but it could be as often as quarterly if you're in a very changing environment and you're trying to do different things and maybe growing quickly or pivoting quite quickly.
Perfect. And it's one where I think we're always going to have touch bases. Obviously, we're not going to touch, back onto our goals once a month unless maybe you're like me going to the gym and that does show up every January. But it's good to keep that front of mind. Maybe I remind myself in March and in July and in September, so that it doesn't come a whole year and I've wondered what I've done and I'm blowing the dust off that old SWOT analysis from 2023.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, it's about accountability, right? You can do the analysis all you want, but it's about what you do afterwards. So yeah, it's about setting your goals. And I am very adamant about including everybody who needs to be involved in the analysis, first of all, but also in the goal setting. So if we set out to go to 3 conferences a year to brush up on our agronomics, on our knowledge on machinery, different advancements in technology in the barn, we need to hold ourselves accountable and hold our business partners, our family members accountable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we seeing any other great comments in there in the chat that we should tackle here?
We do have a couple, and we're running. We got about 5 minutes left, so I do want to tackle a few of these quickly.
Sure.
One question that came out is, how does an operator know that their business is overcapitalized? And is there any guide or reference to know what is ideal? So if you guys want to give that some thought.
Sure. So a lot of what we do is we do a lot of benchmarking. We have a whole bunch of a lot of groups that we put together across the different provinces that we do work in, and we benchmark them against each other, and we have about, I believe, over 200 different operations in a benchmark. So this allows us to really show a producer where they kind of stack in their industry and kind of where they stack against their peers. So kind of a plug here with us is that if you're a part of, it doesn't have to be our benchmark, it can be a neighbor group, it can be a group within maybe one of your bankers maybe have a group, just a general idea of how to compare ourselves against people in the same industry. Also, we do some analysis on operations where we really try to see the financial health of your business. So if you have a really a strong balance sheet or not, and then you can kind of see based on a general idea of how many acres, how many animals do you have, and then your equipment cost per year, whether it's amortization, which is a non-cash item, but we still look at kind of how much equipment do you have, what are you spending on repairs compared to call it a norm. There's some publicly available, call it resources as well provincially, on what they see as a typical farm as well. So there's a couple options, but I would say communicating with others outside of your 4 walls, and not so much on the anecdotal piece, but really kind of a formalized groups. I think those are probably the best way to really understand how you stack up and to get other ideas from others.
Yeah, and I think the obvious examples where they're way too far, having way too much equipment. If I were to tell you should have a milker for each dairy cow, you'd think I was crazy. But if I said, well, maybe they only go milking every 10 days, then maybe we're off on the other side. So, we're going to have a little bit of a balance in the middle where everyone feels is the right number. And what the right number for you is might be different than what your neighbor is. You might want to run more equipment and try and do some custom farming to make sure you can get that crop off if you always have a short window. And so those are individual numbers as well, but there's going to be some guidelines we can all refer back to.
I agree with you, Colleen. Like we have in some of our groups, we have some who say, nope, I need, my 3 combines for my 6,000 acres because I want to be able to get the crop off in 2 days. And others will say, you're crazy. Why do you need that? They say, because I need it. And so your comfort level with your own numbers also has to fit your style, right? And people might tell you have too much, and it probably is true or probably isn't true, but preference and individual situation definitely does play a big part.
And for sure, that's the individuality that farmers love about their business, right? Is what fits for me may not fit for each of you. So that's a great question. I want to just have one more question that I want to sneak in here before we close up our session. Explain how to use the SWOT for a new agribusiness startup versus an existing business that's been operating for several years.
Okay, so if we're in an existing business, we have a pretty good idea of our landscape, or should have a pretty good idea of the landscape of what we're trying to accomplish, what we're doing, and the external factors that are at play. If we're in a new agribusiness, those are vital things to get up to speed on, right? Those are vital things that I don't think I'm going to be buying a dairy farm if I'm not aware of, say, some of the risks or some of the disease risk or what have you. I think it's something that's very, very important to conduct. So if we start on a brand new one, I'm looking at buying a farm, I want to try something new. I need to understand what my strengths are. And I don't think my strengths will probably fall under the actual execution of an agribusiness. But you can still apply your personal strengths to the venture you're trying to undergo. But I would say if you're trying to identify opportunities and threats, those are things that you need to do a little bit of legwork on your own to be able to understand what landscape you're in. And so if you don't understand those things, I would say it's very important to get up to speed on that before you undergo any big decisions, just because you don't know what you don't know. And that can be very, very scary and threatening to your livelihood as a business.
Yeah. And one of the other things in there is you just don't have that track record yet. And maybe you do have the track record on growing a great crop under the guidance of working, growing with someone else previously, but you don't know exactly what it's like for you. So those first two, the strengths and weaknesses that are a little bit more internal, we're going to make some educated guesses and we're going to refine them as we go. And as you get more experience, you'll know a little bit more. Maybe something that you didn't think was a weakness or a strength pops up in that time frame. So you might just refresh on them a little bit more often.
Exactly.
Alex, Colleen, thank you both so much. We could talk for another hour on this. I know we could. We've committed to our hour, so we are going to close it off with that. Want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will make the link available in the upcoming days for you to review this, watch it again, share it with whether it be your friends or your other family members involved in your business, perhaps. Want to take this time to plug the upcoming session, which the next one is on February the 6th, and it will also feature Alex and Colleen on best practices for risk identification, and that is on February the 6th. So encourage you all while it's fresh in your mind. Register for those if you're able to join us. We would love to have you. And with that, we're going to close it off. Thank you, everyone, for taking the last hour to spend with us. Be safe going back to your businesses, and thank you for spending the day with us.